Welcome to Fanfic Voice. Marvel the Foundation. Chapter 11 Banner on Board. Bruce followed the man for 40 minutes as they went down to the meeting spot. Bruce knew there were much faster ways to get down there, but his guide seemed to take a much longer and busier route. When he had asked why they took this route, he was told that this route was much worse for an ambush, so he would not feel as nervous on these big open streets as he might do walking through dark, narrow alleyways with a stranger. Bruce considered it a good sign that they would think so far ahead to ensure he was not too stressed out. After all, he knew best what would happen if he failed to stay calm. As they traveled in silence, Bruce had plenty of time to let his mind wander to all the possible ways this meeting could go. Would it be a trap set by Ross? Or some shady organization that wanted him for evil reasons? Or was it truly a way out of this cursed life he now lived? Reaching the open place where the meeting should take place, Bruce couldn't see anyone around except the man who led him there. Something that made him feel like it might have been a trap after all. "All right, Dr. Banner, the boss, should be here soon. He is an important person, so we couldn't risk having him out in the open for long, you see." Bruce was somewhat relieved by that, though it also raised the question that if this person was so important, was it then fine for them to meet him? Bruce might not like his green part, but he knew that he was for sure the most dangerous thing around here. Bruce didn't have to wait long before he heard something coming from the sky. Looking up, he became sure that these people weren't from the military. No way the military had tech like this. Slowly, the sleek back jet landed with the precision of a helicopter. Bruce knew a thing or two about tech and couldn't help but be impressed merely by the design of this thing. His scientist self already wanted to study this advanced piece of tech. Soon, the back of the jet opened, and a ramp appeared. Bruce took a step backwards in shock as it seemed the fucking black stormtroopers stepped out. The only reason he was still not legging it was because those heavily armed soldiers were positioned around a young man in a pitch-black suit. "You called that an armed guard? That is a fucking special elite unit," Bruce accused his guide, who gave a light chuckle. "You will soon find that the military you know is little more than an annoyance or even a tool for the big guys out there," he said mysteriously before he started to walk forward to meet the group coming towards them. Bruce stood there alone for a moment before he decided to bite the bullet and follow along a step behind, his inner researcher wanting answers. He took the chance to watch the man up ahead. He looked far too young to be someone so important for this kind of get-up. Clearly European as well. "Give us some space," the young man suddenly said as he waved his guards away. The men looked at each other for a moment before nodding and waiting where they stood while the man continued closer to Bruce on his own. "Hello, Dr. Banner. It's a pleasure to meet you," the man said, stopping a few meters from Bruce. "Hello. I'm afraid I don't know your name, sir," Bruce said and looked toward his guide, only to notice that he seemed to have left while he was distracted. "Oh, how terrible my manners have become. Allow me to introduce myself then," the man said with a light, confident smile on his face. "I am Alexander Ricci, head of the Ricci family, but more importantly, I speak on behalf of O5-1 of the O5 Council." Bruce was smart enough to know he was talking with another smart person. He did not say much, but he gave just enough information to make the listener curious and want to know more. Bruce knew this, but he still couldn't do anything as he really did have more questions than ever and wanted answers. A few years ago, before the accident, Bruce might not have known what the Ricci family was, but having spent time in South America, he knew about the biggest name in the drug business, the Ricci family. Now, the question is, why was one of the most powerful criminals working for someone else? "I have heard about the Ricci family, though I have no idea who this O5-1 is or what the O5 Council is." Bruce finally decided to ask the questions he had been so clearly handed. "I would have been surprised if you knew that, Drive, very surprised, in fact. Look at my men back there. Do you see the symbol they wear on their bodies?" Alexander asked with the same confident smile on his lips. Bruce looked over the guards again and focused on the little white symbol on their shoulders. A strange white circle with another circle inside with 3 arrows pointing towards the middle. He had never seen it before today, or at least he didn't remember seeing it. Can't say I have no. He shook his head and waited for Alexander to continue. I am a member of the Foundation, well that is just what I call it for day-to-day use. Its full name is the Special Containment Procedures Foundation. Or the SCP Foundation for short, or even just the Foundation. The man said, sounding mighty proud of this foundation that Bruce had never heard of before. I'm afraid I can't say I have ever heard about this SCP Foundation of yours. As Bruce said that, Alexander burst into a peal of light laughter. Oh, I am very happy you say that, if not, then it would mean we had failed in our job. We are a secret organization, after all, even the current president of the US doesn't know about us, and we have more power than you would believe possible. Alexander said lightly with the same smile on his face. And why does this foundation want me? I don't come without trouble, you know. Bruce said and pointed towards the modified heart rate monitor on his wrist. Internally, Bruce wasn't sure how much of what he was hearing could be believed. It sounded like the man had been brainwashed by a cult more than anything. That comes very close to the purpose of the Foundation itself. To secure, contain, and protect. That is what we do, we secure SCP objects, we contain them, and we protect mankind from the abnormal. We sacrifice so others don't have to, we are the Foundation. All right now, you kinda sound like a cult. Bruce said with a nervous chuckle. Something Alexander just smiled at. Well, when you truly believe in something, you do have the voice of conviction. The Foundation is a group that is above all governments and powers. We stand above all interests but to protect mankind from SCP objects and other anomalous events. And what are these SCP objects you claim to protect mankind from? Bruce said as he started to really think this was some cult with all the talk about protecting mankind and stuff. To explain that, well, you, Dr. Banner, would be considered an SCP object. An object with some kind of anomalous properties or making. Now I know what you want to say. Alexander quickly stopped him from interrupting him. The experiment you were a part of should have failed, you should have died that day. Yet you didn't, instead, you became something so much more than what should have been possible even if the experiment succeeded. You should not have become what you did, no science can explain it. Therefore, the only explanation is that something anomalous happened. Alexander continued while holding up his hand to signal for Bruce to hold his questions. The Foundation's task is to find and contain the anomalous to keep mankind safe and unknowing. After all, if the people knew about the alien civilizations out there, all they did would feel meaningless. He continued and just dropped a bomb as he pretty much told Bruce that aliens were real. To do this, the Foundation requires many things, one of them is money, which my Ricci family can offer, at least to cover a small part of the Foundation's costs. Another thing we need is bright minds like yours to study and understand SCP objects. After all, a SCP object can be anything from a man that can turn into a huge, powerful green monster to a deadly virus that turns its victims into machines. Does that exist? Bruce couldn't help but interrupt as the scientist in him grew interested in that last thing. Both of those examples are indeed real SCP objects. So yes, we need bright minds to help figure them out, help design ways to contain them, or, if possible, cure them. The man said in a tone that said he clearly knew of Bruce's desire for just that. If you choose to join us, we can offer you protection against Ross and his kind. We can offer you the chance to return to doing meaningful research and give you the resources to do many things. With us, you could do almost anything you wanted. From helping with black tech to biology, geology, the study of alien objects left behind from their visits to Earth. Everything a brilliant scientist dreams of, we can offer. And in return, we want nothing but your loyalty. Bruce couldn't help but think this sounded too good to be true. You got to know that sounds too good to be true. Does it really? I already said what we do is kept a secret for everyone, keeping you hidden from Ross would be no extra work on our part. We have many ongoing projects that could use someone as smart as you, so we would benefit a lot there. And as a possible cure. While some inside the Foundation might want a way where you gain full control over a full cure, we would still like a cure if possible. After all, if one can be made, then there is the possibility of another. Alexander calmly explained. Bruce couldn't help but think about it again, and it made some sense. The only real downside for them would be if he lost control. Other than that, it would cost them almost nothing to get him, and he would even be thankful for being given work to do. I guess that is true, but what about my SCP, I guess? Won't that be a problem? I won't lie and say that there couldn't be some problems from that. We would start your work somewhere remote and with SCPs and equipment with as little danger to both yourself and others as possible. If we decide you are stable enough after some closer observation, we could move you to a site where a containment cell is ready to contain you should you feel the need for it. And yes, Dr. Banner, we have been watching you for a while already. Yet we had to keep our distance, both so you didn't notice but also your shield handlers didn't notice anything either. It wasn't until orders from above that we finally decided to make contact with you. Alexander said and threw out some bait about shield, which indeed Banner took. Shield handlers? Bruce asked as he didn't know who that was or that someone had watched him all this time, let alone more than one group. Yes, shield, they are a group of spies and were not meant to handle what I would consider Foundation work. We can't always get SCP objects fast enough, some enter the governments, and few are hard to recover from there. We lost one some years back, and Peggy Carter and Howard Stark discovered it. They founded this agency to stop evil people from using SCPs, though after their deaths, SHIELD, which has some ridiculous long name I won't bother with, became little more than lapdogs for the US government, taking care of their dirty work. Bruce was fascinated as he listened to Alexander speak. He began to really hope all of this was true, to learn of a whole new side of the world to explore. That is a lot to take in all at once. Yes, it might be. Well, you can take on this trial work we have for you. It would not allow you to learn of any deep secrets of ours, and we could still allow you to leave without more than a promise from you to never mention anything about us for the rest of your life. And we could then ask you if you wanted to join us for real, to dedicate yourself to all of mankind and work beyond any corrupt governments and militaries. Bruce had to admit that the offer was far too good to possibly turn down. A chance to get the life he should have had if not for that cursed accident. As well as a whole new possible world of impossible science to explore. All right. I can't really turn you down, I guess. Bruce finally admitted after a moment, earning an even wider smile. Chapter 12 Coulson sent running scared. Alex was very satisfied after his talk with Bruce Banner aka the Hulk. He had carefully planned the meeting and gone through many possible scenarios to prepare himself. Thankfully, his hard work paid off, and Bruce agreed to go out and study SCP-1555, which had been prepared for him. Alex knew well enough that this was just the start, but he was sure that by the time the Hulk should have been demolishing Harlem, he would instead be working for the Foundation. He had even celebrated getting his hands on his first Avenger with a bottle of champagne. Still, after that night, Alex had been taking a small break. And by small break, he had been working hard every day, just not scheming quite as much. System, how are my points looking? Ding! Host has 4,143 points. Continue to work hard and bring glory to the Foundation. System, please summon a random SCP. Alex finally said after trying to find a god to pray to before giving up since he was afraid he might end up summoning that god. Ding! Understood, host, please stand by as the random SCP is summoned. Ding! Warning! Host, a SCP has appeared in the world and is outside Foundation control. Host is asked to deal with the situation and follow the Foundation's goal of securing, containing, and protecting. Ding! Warning! SCP-2399 has appeared. Okay, this is fucking bad. This is one of those XK-class Keter entities that can't be stopped and can't be contained. This world is so fucked, isn't it? I can only hope that something can be done with some of the more powerful techs in this universe. Alex collapsed back in his chair as yet another massive threat to the world spawned in, and he could do nothing to stop it, nor could he get a reward. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting Site-027, a Class 4 Foundation facility in Norway. 50 Class B combat personnel, 500 Class C combat personnel, 450 research personnel, 1000 administrative personnel, and 150 maintenance personnel. Site is also equipped with Foundation Space Monitor equipment and units. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting 112 Foundation satellites and a backdoor into all other satellites currently in orbit around Earth. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting Site-057, a Class 3 Foundation facility in Mexico. 500 Class C combat personnel, 50 research personnel, 100 administrative personnel, and 30 maintenance personnel. Looking up at the system panel floating in front of his face, he was at least satisfied with the rewards. The two sites he got his hands on were both useful since being able to monitor space was a huge boon, and Site-057 even had a launch pad for satellites and other rockets. Still, the reward for getting this thing contained would probably be huge. Such a waste of 1000 points. A deadly threat and little to make up for the danger. Alex overcame the temptation to summon another SCP, ignored SCP-2399, and got back to his work for the day. While he did so, some of his other actions got attention around the world, one being the sudden disappearance of the Hulk, which sent waves in the heart of a one-eyed pirate. Triskelion! Bang! Nicholas Fury slammed his hand down onto the table and looked up at Coulson with fury in his eye. Before him stood the poor, nervous, and sweating Coulson, who had come to deliver a report he didn't want to hear. Care to repeat that, Coulson? Yes, sir. Well, it would seem we lost sight of Banner again. The 3 agents we had watching him, well, sir, they have disappeared, sir. How? How did we lose him? How did we lose our agents? Damn it, Coulson, I want answers. Fury thundered at his nervous subordinate. We don't know, sir, they just disappeared one day. Same as with their target, no signs of it being done by him either. Coulson nervously reported. So we lost the target again, and we lost our agents, and we know nothing? Only this time, we didn't lose the target due to him going green? Damn it, Coulson, this looks like someone took him. Coulson could only nod his head while feeling like crying as he endured his boss's abuse. Well, we have found one possible clue, sir. Why didn't you start with that, Coulson? What is it then? Fury said while glaring hard at Phil. Well, it seems that the Ricci family have started to move in there around the same time we lost contact with our agents. We are not sure if there is a connection, but it's the only clue. Coulson finally said. That made Fury pause for a moment. He didn't think the Ricci would take Banner, but they could have taken out his agents as they moved into the area. Find out, go and talk with Ricci. Find out what he knows. Fury finally said and dismissed Coulson to be left alone with his thoughts. Ricci Mansion in New York. Coulson didn't think it would have been so easy getting an appointment with Mr. Ricci. Yet as soon as he had said where he was from, they had acted like they knew about the supposed super-secret organization and let him inside. As he was led inside, his one-man escort grew to a full 8 highly armed men who looked about ready to riddle his body with bullets at the slightest twitch. Something that made Coulson all the more nervous. Still, he couldn't back out now and followed them through the mansion. The destination, however, wasn't an office but to luxurious pool area towards the back of the manor. What met him was the curious sight: a young man in a pitch-black suit was lounging in a reclining chair as he watched the still water with a glass of wine in his hand. "I apologize for meeting you out here, but you came here in my break. Do forgive me, Mr. Coulson, was it?" he said, glancing at Coulson. "Sit, why don't you?" "Yes, it's fine, thanks." Coulson gave him a nervous smile as he felt at least a dozen pairs of eyes on him hidden around in the shadows. He only slightly glanced at the offered seat before politely rejecting it. "I'm Phil Coulson, an agent of the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistics Division." Coulson was cut off from his introduction with a raised hand. "I want to know why you are here, Mr. Coulson, and not our usual contact in Agent Sitwell." Ricci barked at him, and Coulson could hear all around him the sounds of weapons being drawn. Coulson was surprised to hear Sitwell's name come up out of nowhere and scared by the guards getting ready to shoot. "Wait, stop, stop. Please, I was sent by the director to talk with you." "So you do know Sitwell after all?" "Oh, don't look surprised. I could see recognition in your face at his name." Still, that didn't answer what Director Pierce wants and why he didn't send Sitwell. Coulson had no idea what was going on here. As far as he knew, Ricci should not know about the Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement Logistics Division, much less have any contact with them. Still, hearing Pierce's name, he figured it was above his rank and would just report it to Fury when he got back. "Well, you see, Mr. Ricci, I was sent to ask you a few questions. You see, we lost a few agents and an asset in La Rioja, and we knew you also seemed active in the area and wanted to know if you knew anything. So you come here for answers, do you? Or maybe you even think I had something to do with it. Guess that is why they sent you, in case I killed you. Pierce wouldn't lose someone important as Sitwell and just some random person like you instead." Coulson could only swallow the insult at being called disposable but swore he would complain to Fury about not being told about Sitwell. "What I can tell you, Agent, is that I lost men in La Rioja. One moment, they were down there, the next, gone. So I sent enough men down there to raze the fucking place to the ground if needed." Ricci shouted angrily and threw his wine glass into the marble around the pool. "They found no answers to what happened to my men, so I fucking took the damn place as my own and got rid of every last gang down there daring to stand in my way." Coulson quickly got a picture of what the situation was. Clearly, someone had killed not just his own men but also Ricci's, properly clearing out anyone who could be there to watch over Banner. This had angered Overkill Ricci, who sent down even more men to avenge the slight against him. Now, the questions of who killed those men and why remained, as well as if Banner left as Ricci's men started to make chaos or if the death of his agents was connected with Banner going missing. "And did you find out who was behind the death of your men, Mr. Ricci?" Coulson asked, cursing whoever was stupid enough to anger the Overkill Ricci, which made him come here before the man himself. "I just told you we found nothing. My men were just gone, no trace. At least I can forgive my men for finding nothing if even you guys are clueless as well. Now leave before I send you back to Pierce in a body bag." After that, Coulson quickly fled the expansive mansion and returned to his boss with the report and a complaint about why Sitwell wasn't sent instead. Alex watched as Coulson fled under the escort of his guards, lifted his hand up, and accepted the new glass placed in it a moment later. Taking a sip to wet his throat after that yelling, he leaned back to relax and went over the conversation repeatedly. "Indeed, it would seem Pierce never told Fury about his deal with me. I guess he used the money to fund Hydra. Still, this is good, Fury will be busy dealing with Pierce and will forget about me again quickly." Overall, Alex was happy with the meeting. He saw Phil Coulson and played around with Fury. Now to throw some more bait out soon enough as the fish entered his reach and wait for Fury to bite. Fury's office. Fury was not happy. He had just dismissed the angry Coulson. Now, Fury liked being in control and hated not being in control. Another thing he hated almost as much was not knowing things. And right now, he was angry because he didn't know something he should have known. Which meant he didn't have control over the situation. Cursing under his breath, Fury made his way over to Pierce in such a clear foul mood he scared everyone he came across on the way. He kicked open the door and smacked it closed behind him while glaring at his former mentor. Fury really hated not knowing. "What have you in such a foul mood, Fury?" Alexander asked as he looked up from his work. "I want to know why I was not made aware of the deal with Ricci. What else have I not been made aware of? What else is hidden from me as the damn director?" Fury said loudly and with anger in his voice. "A deal with Ricci? That old thing? You know how we work, Fury, we make a lot of deals with the underworld to help maintain order." Pierce waved away his concerns. "Yes, and I normally know about those deals. Yet I knew nothing about this one. Coulson almost got killed because they said their contact is Sitwell." "Sitwell? He doesn't deal with such things anymore. I guess that because we don't talk much with them, they still consider him their contact? Sitwell should have given the task of handling the deal to someone else years ago." Pierce said patiently. "What is the deal? Why was I not made aware of it, and what other deals are there I am unaware of?" Fury barked off a list of questions while banging his hand down on the desk. "Just the standard deal, really. We wouldn't target them, we tell them about anyone going after them, and they keep paying us. Now, it's not something I pay much attention to, so I can't say I know why you were never informed. And yet, we had plenty of deals like the one with the Ricci. Ask Sitwell for more. He would know who the person in charge should be by now." Pierce said calmly and dismissingly. His tone did little to calm down Fury, but he understood that it made sense that Pierce wouldn't know about it since the deal was not that important a thing. Huffing, Fury left, never noticing the look Pierce gave him or knowing that Pierce made a call right after the door closed behind him. Fury then went to look into this whole affair to find out about other deals, why he didn't know about them, and what had happened to the money. And by that, he meant that he would send Coulson to find out the truth. Chapter 13 Pym takes the bait. It had been a week since Alex had last summoned a random SCP, and the monotonous days of just sitting at home and working in his command bunker blended together. His time went to dealing with requests for funds or D-class personnel or for some rather extreme experiments. Since Alex was filling in for the entire O5 Council as well as for the Ethics Committee, all this extra work was pushed towards him. He could only feel lucky that the Foundation was still so small, as everything he did just added more work to his table, like now as he was dealing with dozens of requests for nuking Wakanda and taking all their vibranium for Foundation use daily. Given what they had so far done with the stuff, Alex had to admit he was really damn tempted to get his hands on not just the vibranium itself but also all the tech hidden away under that hologram. Maybe I can get my hands on more. That idea slowly took root in his mind, and with each additional request for the magic metal, made him more and more tempted to ruin the day of some fearsome arms dealer. It was on one of those otherwise boring days, he was informed that one Dr. Pym had called and was asking questions. Should I invite him over here for a chat? Or send him somewhere else? Decisions. Alex, drumming his fingers against the leather armrest of his chair, thought aloud. He didn't know much about Pym from the movies. One thing he did know was the fact that Pym was the first Ant-Man and a brilliant mind worth a fortune. The best way to get him on board would be starting with vibranium. Not talking about SCPs, just the study of vibranium, and from there, let him pick up the so-called secrets of the Foundation. Yes, have the others working with him whisper about SCPs. If he thinks he learned about it on his own, even if I bring proof that he is wrong, he won't believe me. Alex smacked the armrest as he decided on a course of action. He quickly sent out emails and made a few calls. He would soon get his hands on the key to Ant-Man, and maybe even not just the old Ant himself but also new ones. As long as he could save his wife, he could get just about anything from the man, he was sure of it. However, getting Pim would make the need for more vibranium all the more urgent. He made a call to Site 014 to have them set up everything needed for Pim to enter into the trap set for him willingly. With Hank Pym. When Hank had been kicked out of the very company he himself founded by who he thought of as a friend, he had been furious. When his own daughter sided with the damned betrayer, he had only been all the angrier. No sooner had he left the building before he was stopped by men offering him a job. At first, he thought they might have been the reason he was fired, but after accusing them, he quickly learned the truth. They knew about the plot against him while he was blind to it. He didn't really give them much attention after that. Sure, he took the card and promised he would call them later, but that was mainly to get them to back off. Getting back home, he couldn't help but start thinking back on things. All the signs had been as clear as day. He slowly lost control of the company and didn't even notice it. Bit by bit, he was cut off and shut out. He felt like an idiot for not seeing it. He remembered the whispers and strange looks he had gotten for months. Everyone in the damn company knew it was happening except him. After that, he spent time just hiding at home while trying to get over the betrayal of his friend and daughter. The time off had also been good for him since it had allowed him to see so much he had missed when he thought back over the years. Still, Hank was used to being busy, and he quickly found himself restless and wanting to do something. It was at this point he remembered the job offer he had gotten back then. He wasn't interested in the job but the people who gave it. He hadn't thought about it until now, but those people knew he was going to get kicked out, and sure, everyone in the company knew, but few knew when it would happen. So these people had planted spies deep inside his company. This had sent him into a long search for who these people could be, and the more he looked, the more surprised, impressed, and scared he got. He found nothing at all. He had no clue from his memories about who they were inside the company, and they didn't seem to exist anywhere in the world. Sure, the name the Foundation was not really unique. The problem was that there were a whole lot of foundations, and not a single one fit the bill for the company that invited him that day. Which means that it is a black company, one that didn't exist in any official scene. He wasn't a stranger to those kind of companies or organizations. After all, he used to work for SHIELD and it didn't get more shady than those guys. Which only made the fact that he couldn't find these guys all the more impressive. Even SHIELD was in essence a public agency, even if they had no real oversight and operated off the books. He knew that working outside the laws could bring benefits. Hank himself was not new to working outside some laws, he had done that before and really didn't think much about most of those laws out there. He knew that they didn't mean shit to anyone with money or power. Still, he did get curious about the whole thing. The more time he spent looking and finding nothing, the more interested he got. He had quite a bit of faith in his abilities, so the fact that he found nothing was as impressive as it was surprising. In the end, he figured that he really didn't have much to lose by giving them a call. It wasn't like they could do anything to him, right? Sure, he didn't use the suit anymore, but he had it, and he could use it if needed. Calling the number, he only had to wait for a moment before his call was connected. Hello, this is Hank Pym here, I'm calling about a job offer. Ah yes, Mr. Pym, I'm glad you called. I do hope you enjoyed some time off. The voice of a woman came back. Young sounding, but also educated. Hank was used to dealing with people of a certain type, and he was reasonably sure the woman here was not just working in HR. Well, I'm sure you can understand why I wouldn't start a new job as soon as I left the old one. Been a long time since I had proper time off. The voice just giggled at him. Yes, we fully understand that, we knew we might not get you to join us. We simply had to try though, you are a brilliant mind that should not be passed over if possible. Cross made a big mistake in letting you go, Mr. Pym. He thought you were done after the Pym particle, but we here are sure that you can make many other things than just that. The talk of his most prized achievement put him on guard. He had expected they might want it, he knew Darren was no doubt trying to remake his work with that daughter of his right now. So you are after my Pym particle? If that is the case, then there is no point to this. I'm not giving it to anybody. Hank didn't let his decision on that matter remain unheard. Well, I would lie if I said it wouldn't be something we would like. But we would still want you to work for us even without it. What we value much more is the mind that made it in the first place. Her words did little to make Hank lower his guard, but it did feel good to have his brilliant mind valued rather than just one invention, no matter how great. So you hope for something better than my masterpiece? You sure are aiming high, miss. I never did get your name. Hank decided to dig for some information. I was wondering if you would ask that, Mr. Hank. I am Dr. Brown, Dr. Amelia Brown, and I am the head of the research site you would hopefully start at. Amelia Brown. Not a name known to Hank. He quickly tried to check the net for a Dr. Amelia Brown but came up with nothing. Can't say I have ever heard of you before, Miss Brown. Perhaps you have worked on something I would know about. He pushed further. Oh, I would have been surprised if you knew of my work. My current employer likes to remain secret, so our work is rarely made public, and as a high-ranking researcher, they helped me cover up any trace of my old life. It does get lonely sometimes not to have contact with my family, but I don't regret it. Accepting the promotion was well worth it. Hearing that, Hank only grew more sure that this was some underworld black tech company he was dealing with. However, being able to cover up a doctor like that couldn't be easy for sure. I am not really sure you are selling this job all that well talking about dark things like that, Dr. Brown. Hank was not sure if she was an actual doctor, but he decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and take her words at face value. Well, I'm sorry about that, my mind is not fully in this. I just got the news that my request for a new sample of vibranium has passed, so we get more to play around with soon. The woman did sound excited about that, properly too excited as she gave away some important information like that. Vibranium, you say? You have vibranium to study? And more than one sample? Hank was shocked to hear about that. He knew a bit about it, and he would never forgive Stark for using all of it for a damn shield of all things. Sure, he knew that sometimes a gram was found here and there, but it was always sold for nearly impossible prices, and the low amount made it damn near useless. Yes, we do have vibranium to work with. Not much, though, and what we have in the organization, we have to share between many teams and sites around the world. Since the brass decided to buy up 10 kilos of it, we have all been busy. It truly is an amazing thing. Which is why I have been requesting more daily since then. Hank could hardly believe what he heard, 10 kilograms? Surely, that was impossible. There shouldn't be that much in the world as a whole. Not unless it was that damned shield of Stark's. Are you joking with me now? I know about vibranium, and I know for a fact that it's so rare it's all but impossible to get more than a gram or two in a year, and that is only due to pure luck. Hank couldn't help but say. That is just what they want you to think, Mr. Pym. While it is indeed rare, there is quite a bit more of it than you would think. They simply hoard it all to keep prices so high. Even this new sample I have gotten is something we found in the British Museum. An artifact was made of it, and they didn't know, so we helped ourselves to it. Hank could indeed see someone having a large chunk of it and selling it per gram just to keep the price at the level it was at. And the idea that an artifact was made of it? Well, Stark had made it into something useless, so he could almost see other people doing the same in the past. And I would get to work with it if I joined you? And what about the whole getting one's past erased? I don't want that. Hank really wanted to play around with something as rare as vibranium, so he started to ask about the job. Well, if you joined us, you would be working at my site, and given your skills, you could easily work on most projects. However, only if the needed clearance is low enough. To get a higher security clearance, you would indeed need to dedicate yourself to us. If you don't wish to do that, well, we can still allow you to work on the vibranium, but anything you learn or invent will belong to us. The woman started to explain. Well, I do believe it might be possible to work something out then. Hank finally said after some time. He really just couldn't let the chance to use vibranium for something better than Stark pass up. Site-001. Alex was happy that Pim had accepted the offer and would start working already tomorrow. The man sure had been impatient on working with the vibranium. Alex didn't care if something would change with some plot because he stole the artifact. He didn't care about Wakanda at all and even hoped some SCP would deal with them. Now that I think about it, their hologram shield is perfect for hiding some containment site under. The people living in hiding and believing to be unknown to the world didn't know that their fate was slowly getting decided as one man's patience was getting worn down by the constant requests of his subordinates. Chapter 14 Budapest Operation. While Alex's mind and focus was on Pim and vibranium, the rest of the world moved on without pause. One event taking place right now was a messy SHIELD mission, which would prove to be nothing but a failure, at least as long as no one else interfered. With Natalia Romanoff. Natalia, or Natasha, as she went by, could hardly believe that this was happening. After so long, she would finally be free from the nightmares of the Red Room once and for all, and the rest of the world would also be free of it. She would never forget what Clint had done for her, that he had gone against orders like that just for her. Giving her a new chance in life, a chance to do good for once. She really needed that, to do some good. Her whole life, she had been staining her hands red with blood. Now, it was finally time to clean them, to earn just a little redemption. She was all too happy that the first step in that direction would be to bring down the Red Room and end the monster that is Dreykov. The only black spot about this situation was the fact that to confirm that Dreykov was inside the hospital, they needed to use the man's own daughter. Natasha wasn't happy about having to condemn an innocent child to death over something her father had done, but there was no other way. It pained her heart as she stood there in the window, watching the girl enter the building that had been tagged with explosives over the past few days. Natasha, are we clear? Clint's voice sounded from the radio. With one last look, she hardened her heart and lifted it to her own mouth. We clear. Boom. Only moments after her signal did the air itself recoil from the explosion that shook the very building she was standing in, while the noise and flames followed right after. Detonation successful, going to confirm the target's death, she said after a few moments of silence, which was quickly broken by screams and panic from the many civilians out on the streets. It was pure chaos out there. Natasha slowly made her way through the fleeing crowd and burning fragments that had been dislodged from the building by the explosion. She knew roughly where the target's body should be, though getting to it wouldn't be easy. Still, she had to confirm it, to be entirely sure that it was done, that little Antonia's death hadn't been for nothing. As she made her way through the burning ruins, she heard Clint call over the radio, "Be careful, you won't have much time before this incident brings someone down here." He reminded her. She knew he was right, one simply doesn't blow up a building in the middle of a capital city and not draw attention. No doubt firefighters and police were on the way. Probably a good chance that some anti-terror special forces were also setting out. Working as fast as she could, she entered the burning building and tried to find Dreykov's remains. Yet his office had utterly collapsed, so his body was buried under the floor above. Unable to see the body herself, she drew her gun and fired a few shots toward where she suspected him to be buried. She heard someone coming up from behind and quickly spun around, ready to shoot, though seeing it was Clint, she lowered her gun. "Target status?" he asked as he looked around. "Under all this, likely dead, and if not, the fire will take care of it before he can be saved," she answered after a moment. "All right, we can confirm him as dead then. Let's get out of here before someone shows up," he replied after a moment as they both heard sirens in the distance quickly getting louder. Natasha wasn't about to disagree with that. While she would have liked to get a proper confirmation about Dreykov's death, she was sure the mission was a success. Upon leaving the building, they were spotted by a few police officers who had arrived quicker than expected. The officers, upon seeing armed people dressed in tactical gear leave the building, immediately grew alert and drew their own guns. Fejivert lees fikud jle foldra. They shouted while pointing their guns at the duo. Natasha didn't like this situation, and she was sure Clint felt the same. They might be on a mission, but she doubted that they would be able to return home for debriefing if they surrendered. Yet things quickly went from bad to worse as more police arrived and called in the situation, no doubt prompting more people to be sent here quickly. They needed to get away from here right away, which sadly meant they would have to use force. Ducking behind cover, she turned to Clint. "What now?" she asked, hopeful he had an answer for this situation. "We have no backup, we gotta get out of here on our own." His reply was disheartening but expected. "You'd also esali, jajajan ki filamailt kazekal, kulunban tuzet nyitank." Someone shouted from among the police as they got impatient. Others echoed that by shouting most. "Shit, we gotta break away from here, I don't like it, but we have to fight them." Clint cursed, and Natasha mirrored his mood. These people were just trying to do their job, yet now they had to pay for it. Still, while she didn't like it, she understood that this was a do-or-die situation, they were sounding far too tense to not shoot them on sight. "Back through to the other side?" Natasha asked as the last way out to avoid bloodshed. Clint by her side gave it a thought before nodding his head and agreed. Taking a deep breath, she targeted a large window on the adjacent building and shot it out. The sound of glass breaking distracted the police enough that they took their attention off of their hiding spot for a moment, allowing the two of them to run back into the remains of the burning building, and break line of sight with the police before they had a chance to shoot them. Natasha and Clint quickly ran through the remains, vaulting and jumping over broken walls and through collapsed doorways. They expertly dodged the flames and falling debris as they made their way to the other side of the building while listening to the shouts of the Hungarian police behind them. The police officers were clearly not quite as brave as the two agents and hesitated to enter the building. This gave the two of them enough time to escape their chase. Yet it seemed that luck truly was not on their side. After jumping out from a first-story window and down to the street, they appeared right in the path of some Hungarian special forces. Seeing what was clearly two armed combatants jump out of the building that had been attacked, the special forces were not in doubt that these two were responsible for the terrorist attack. Natasha and Clint didn't even have the time to curse their luck before the special forces opened fire. The situation quickly escalated into a firefight, and a deadly one at that. The special forces, while skilled, didn't quite reach the level needed to dispatch the two elite agents that would one day be known as the Avengers Hawkeye and Black Widow. They were, however, skilled enough that Clint and Natasha had to give it their all to escape the encirclement. On one side, the loss of life was truly regrettable, but on the other, Natasha happily threw herself into the action. It allowed her for a moment to forget about the death of Antonia. Rolling, jumping, and vaulting between cover with bullets and arrows flying swiftly through the air, Natasha and Clint both showed off the skills that would one day earn them a spot on the Avengers team. They did their best to keep moving and to use every bullet and every arrow fired to open up a chance to disengage from the situation. While the two had never been on a mission together before this, they quickly developed their teamwork due to the intense situation. The intensity, the adrenaline pumping through her body, allowed Natasha to forget her past actions and everything else, focusing solely on the skills drilled into her throughout her life as she fought with everything she had. Moving and dashing hard behind the cover of a car, she sat side by side with Clint, slightly out of breath but with a smile on her usually grim face. "This is intense," Natasha gasped out between breaths. "A bit too intense for my liking," Clint responded. "Cover me." Natasha didn't doubt that he would for even a moment. She left the cover and began an intense shootout with the special forces. Clint also didn't hesitate to offer assistance, as he used his arrows effectively. Fighting their way out of the encirclement, they ran through the narrow streets and made their way towards more populated areas. As they reached the crowds, panic started setting in among the civilians. Yet the action also quickly lessened, as neither side was eager to shoot given the situation. This allowed Clint and Natasha to run through the panicked crowd and into a subway station, where they took advantage of the crowd, slowing down their pursuers. It wasn't the most noble or comfy hiding spot they found. Though they both felt that it was unlikely that they would be found, so now they just needed to wait. And wait, they did, staying right where they were. Without moving, barely able to whisper to one another for 2 days. They then spent another 8 days moving from hiding spot to hiding spot as they made their way out of the city. Spending so much time together in this situation could have had 2 outcomes. One being that they would end up hating one another or becoming best friends. When they made their way back to debrief with Fury, he could immediately see that his agents had gotten a lot closer since the last time he had seen them. With the Foundation, every move Natasha and Clint made while in Budapest had been carefully watched and followed by other agents. The Foundation had dispatched members of the Mobile Task Force Tau-1. Their mission was to secure the Red Room. Captain Alberti, the leader of the task force, was somewhat impressed by the skills shown by Natasha, both in gunfighting and hand-to-hand. He didn't have as many kind words for Clint Barton due to him using a bow as a weapon, of all things. Sure, he could admit that he was skilled at it, but he didn't think it compared to a high-caliber gun. Captain Alberti knew every facet of his target's mission thanks to the informants within S.H.I.E.L.D. Furthermore, he had been alerted to the very likely possibility of the S.H.I.E.L.D. mission being a failure. Since this was the case, he was prepared to dig out the target, one General Dreykov himself. With the help of the nearest Foundation site and a suitable number of bribes, he and his men would be among the first allowed to enter the building across from him. Not as a Foundation task force but as fire rescuers. With this disguise and some of his men also disguised as paramedics, they would be able to extract the general and his daughter without problems. Since everything was already set up, the captain merely needed to wait for the right time to act. Which should be right around now. He shouted into his radio, at which all of his men jumped into action. With the police and special forces all drawn away by the retreating pair of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, he could now move to secure his objective. His men moved with purpose and quickly achieved success. It was a little girl. She had been hurt by the explosion. Knocked unconscious and no doubt with a few broken bones, but otherwise in a decent enough state. He had no doubt that she would make a full recovery. Recovering the primary target also proved simple enough. Having secured his objective, he quickly brought them into 2 ambulances and vacated the premises. As he was sitting in the vehicle and making his way back to their temporary base, he couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed in the mission he had witnessed. It had been loud, drawn a lot of attention, and unsuccessful. Yet he still did agree that the so-called Black Widow had some skills and, with a bit of proper Foundation training, would be a great asset. Now, he just needed to wait until the general woke up, and then his interrogation could begin. Once that was done and he had all the information he needed, he could move on to Phase 2. By the time Natasha and Clint reported their success to Nick Fury, they weren't even lying. Since at this time, General Dreykov was indeed dead, and the Red Room was dismantled, though not because of their actions, but instead because the Red Room had been assimilated into the Foundation. Chapter 15 Not Here to Buy. On another note, Sir. The Black Widow is confirmed to have joined S.H.I.E.L.D. One of Alex's subordinates said while Alex had his daily debrief during his dinner. Alex couldn't help but smile at the exciting news. Oh my, that is interesting news indeed. Say, how long do you think it will take for her to become disillusioned with S.H.I.E.L.D.? He asked casually. Depends on how quickly they start sending her out to do their dirty work. As I see it, they could either send her out a lot without care for her health as she would be seen as disposable. Or they could be more careful about when they send her out and treat her better. Alex nodded, hearing that as he agreed with it. Do we have the ability to make them pick the first option? I don't believe so, sir. Such a decision would be taken far too high up for our men to have a say in it. The response came back. Too bad, really. Still, I'm sure we can make do with either choice given someone of her skills. She should belong to us, he said, and decided poor Natasha's fate. Still, Alex would not mistreat or abuse Natasha in any way. He knew that she wanted to do something good to make up for all the bad she had been forced to do before. He also knew that S.H.I.E.L.D. wouldn't allow for much of that, at least not before the Avengers became a thing. This gave him plenty of time to wait for her to realize that S.H.I.E.L.D. was not the good guys they pretended to be, and then let her know about the Foundation. He didn't doubt that she would be happy to work for him. After all, the Foundation worked purely for the good of mankind as a whole and not just for some wealthy senator. For while the Foundation did a shit ton of shady shit, it was always for the greater good of the world itself. They did, after all, work outside of any national boundaries. Not to mention that it would surely be easier to feel the good one did with an increasing number of SCPs safely contained than assassinations, which are supposedly for the good. His musing was interrupted by a sudden knock at the door before it was quickly opened. Outside stood a member of Alpha 1 who peeked in. The team is ready to start its operation soon, sir. They can start as soon as they are ready. I will follow their progress from my office, Alex said and waved him off. After that, he quickly finished the meal and headed back to his quarters and down into his command room. Getting into the chair, he opened up the sound and video feeds and leaned back to watch things unfold. Flashback. Site-001. Alex was going through the daily motion of declining every request for more vibranium and for actions to be taken against Wakanda. Nothing new there, really, but this one request's title caught his attention. It wasn't as much a request for action as a request for a plan of operation for how the Foundation should act if an SCP entered or appeared within Wakanda. This actually had Alex curse as he finally realized a big problem with that little isolated country. It was a damned blind spot for the Foundation. Sure, he had a backdoor into all their satellites, which meant he had people watching them. Still, he didn't have the ability to act in there. He had liked the idea of an SCP appearing there and helping him take care of the problem. Yet he had to admit that such a strategy was short-sighted. Should a dangerous SCP appear under their shield, then getting it into containment could be problematic. If it was dangerous enough, then the whole world could be doomed before he was able to act. Here he had thought he could ignore them until the tech they had would be outdated compared to the Foundation's. Now, he knew that he needed a way to act within their border, and all he had so far was threatening them with nukes. While it might work in an emergency to stop a K-class scenario, it wouldn't be without drawing a lot of the wrong type of attention to himself. No, Wakanda was now something that stood in his way and the Foundation's way to fulfill its goal, and nothing could be allowed to stand in the way. This single request led to Alex spending hours down in his bunker throwing around ideas and possible plans, as well as imagining many different scenarios and SCPs that could cause trouble if they appeared there. All of this led to Alex having to make a few hard decisions and change both the plot and a lot of lives as he sent out a few orders. Notice D22458896-11. To all personnel with security clearance of Class 3 or higher. It has come to the attention of general management that a flaw in Foundation procedures exists concerning securing and containing SCP objects within the nation of Wakanda. All personnel are therefore invited to come forward with suggestions as to how the Foundation can remedy this flaw as soon as possible. In an effort to save the valuable time of upper management, it has been decided that only site directors are allowed to hand in suggestions. Therefore, you must first get it approved by your local site director. Signed, Personnel ID S224-6-04A. Personal Assistant 205-1. He could only hope that the directors would filter the worst stuff off the top and not leave him drowning in absurd suggestions and hopefully get something he could use. Next, he decided to give the other special task force he had gotten their first real task. Alex was fairly sure that whatever solution to the Wakanda situation would be made a lot easier with more vibranium. It just so happened that Alex knew where he could get 200 kilograms of the stuff. And in doing so, he could abandon plans involving paying for it. Mission notice to Gamma 12. The Foundation has a need for the stockpile of the valuable mineral vibranium from the arms dealer Ulysses Claue. His file is attached. Your task will be getting as much of the around 200 plus kg he possesses while, if possible, leaving him alive. All other details can be worked out on your own. Mission Clearance 4. Signed, Personnel IDS 224-6-04A. Personal Assistant to 05-1. Alex had a small hope of still being able to get his hands on some nukes or just the materials for them out of Ulysses, so for now, he would get to live if he behaved himself and handed over the purple rocks he had. Flashback end. James Cornwell, Commander of Task Force Gamma 12. James Cornwell, the formidable commander of Task Force Gamma 12, watched intently as the operation commenced. The moment the green light blinked on, signaling the start of their daring raid, he raised his arm, signaling his elite squad. Like clockwork, his men launched a potent EMP missile, its trajectory aimed precisely at the heart of the enemy's stronghold. This tactical move was crucial. It would cripple any communications, preventing their target from calling for reinforcements, and it would erase any digital footprint of their covert operation. As the EMP missile detonated with a silent, electrifying burst, James didn't wait for confirmation. He knew the efficiency of his team and his equipment. Confirmation was a formality they could bypass. They descended upon the target, swooping in with their high-tech gear, capitalizing on the ensuing chaos and confusion. The electromagnetic pulse had plunged the enemy's base into darkness, but James, with his advanced night vision helm, saw everything as clear as day. The main gate was a frenzy of confused guards scrambling in the sudden blackout. James and his team didn't hesitate. They burst through the gates, guns blazing. Amidst shouts, they moved like a storm, sweeping aside any resistance. James led the charge, his rifle barking in short, controlled bursts, taking down guard after guard who were barely able to mount a defense in the pandemonium. In the thick of the assault, James's instincts kicked in. Cover! He bellowed, launching himself backwards in a gravity-defying leap, narrowly evading a barrage of enemy fire that whizzed past where he stood moments before. The corridor erupted with enemy gunfire, but James was already in motion, signaling his team. In a heartbeat, his men lobbed grenades down the hostile corridor. Taking cover against the wall, James and his squad braced for impact. The explosion was a deafening roar, a symphony of destruction that masked their advance. Amidst the chaos, the cries of their adversaries were drowned out as James unleashed a relentless barrage down the corridor. His men joined in, their coordinated fire cutting down the opposition with ruthless efficiency. Within moments, the corridor was silent, save for the distant echoes of combat elsewhere in the ship. "Any injuries?" James called out, his voice steady amid the adrenaline rush. "None, sir," came the crisp response. "All right, let's keep moving." There wasn't a need for many words, and the group set out while the sounds of fighting filled the ship as his other men met their own share of resistance. Still, as some of the best men the Foundation had to offer, James and the others didn't have much difficulty taking ground, and fast. They just had vastly superior training and equipment. Sure, the hostiles had plenty of weapons, but the armor James and his men wore could stop most normal bullets, and few used strong enough armor-piercing ones indoors like this. Reaching Ulysses' office, they were met with heavy resistance. The door exploded inwards as James and his team made a dynamic entry. The room erupted into a fierce gunfight. James darted from cover to cover, his shots echoing through the room. Ulysses, caught by surprise, attempted to retaliate but was outgunned. In a moment of swift action, James vaulted over a desk, disarming Ulysses and pinning him to the ground, effectively ending the confrontation. "Ulysses, you have two options: hand over the vibranium, all of it. Or we kill you and take it ourselves. For us, it just depends on whether or not we have to use another bullet before leaving. James commanded the man. Ulysses himself was angry and scared. He didn't like being robbed, not one bit. What scared him was how easily his men had been taken out. These people were dangerous, and he didn't know where they came from. Not much of a choice then, is it? Still, I know when I have been beaten, I submit. He finally said with a sigh and a burning rage in his heart. Within a mere quarter of an hour, James's team had secured the ship. He stood imposingly in the office of their target, Ulysses, an infamous arms dealer. The man lay on the ground, his expression a mix of anger and fear, surrounded by the barrels of Gamma 12's guns. That is smart of you, arms dealer. Now, these two here. James pointed to two of his men. We'll follow you as you lead them to the payload. Don't try anything, or it will be the last thing you will ever do. James warned. Ulysses had no choice but to lead his captures to where he had hidden his greatest treasure. Nor could he do anything as they brought it all away, and he could do nothing but grit his teeth as billions left his pockets before they even entered. James didn't care for the thoughts of the arms dealer, he only spared him because he was asked to do that if possible. And Gamma 12 always fulfilled their tasks to perfection. He just wanted this done with and quickly. Every minute they spent here meant that the risk of exposure grew, so he made his men hurry up and left with their load of more than 200 kilograms of the precious vibranium, less than an hour since they touched down. While he left poor Ulysses behind, who couldn't believe how fast he had lost his men and most of his wealth. He didn't even know who caused all this, he didn't even think the US had men this good. Site 001. Alex had seen the whole thing and found it far less exciting than most action movies he had seen. There just wasn't any real tension. His men just steamrolled the enemy without resistance. Still, Alex was happy that he got what he wanted, though he did worry about how this might change things in the future. Still, at least for a while, I shouldn't have to worry about not being able to fulfill requests for vibranium. Alex then started to type away at his keyboard and updated the inventory for the Foundation with another 200 kilograms of vibranium. He knew that a lot of people would become very happy when they went to request some and suddenly found it a whole lot easier getting it. However, he would need to get it all weighed properly before he would know just how much he had gotten in total. Tomorrow, I will go and get Bruce and bring him into the Foundation proper and see if he also wants to join in on the vibranium research. It might be good for Pym to work together with him to help him get into the Foundation as well. Alex mumbled to himself as plans kept being formed in his mind. Chapter 16 SCP-1555. Alex was flying down towards the new Site 1555, which was little more than a shack with a tiny laboratory outside the range of SCP-1555. He knew the long-term plan was to send out agents who needed a break after some scary experience, send them down there so they could calm down and recover. That was something Alex could agree with. He knew well that some SCPs could scar the people working with them. This meant that there were only two choices: either give them paid leave for months at a time or send them out to a place like SCP-1555 and the site, where all they had to do was guide curious civilians away. It had been 3 weeks since Bruce Banner had agreed to join up and study SCP-1555 as a kind of trial run. So far, the reports he had gotten back from the people sent to monitor and assist him had all been positive. It was while he was looking out the window when he was suddenly interrupted by an aide. "Sir, we have found one Kevin Thompson which matches the target you wanted found," the aide said while holding a phone. This made Alex think about how he should handle this situation. He knew the man was dangerous with his mind control power. He knew he didn't want him to join the Foundation, the man was pure scum. No, instead, Alex was trying to figure out if he should kill him now or wait. I don't think he has met Jessica Jones yet. I could find her without him easily enough. What to do, what to do? I want the man watched 24/7 from a minimum distance of 250 meters. Should his path ever seem to cross that of any Foundation personnel with a clearance of Class 3 or higher, Kill him with a bullet to the head from outside the observation range. If he takes any form of contact with personnel under Class 3, kill him as well. Also, inform me if he encounters a woman named Jessica Jones, any woman with that name. He told the aide and waved him off as he went back to plan the fate of people. So far, he was thinking of letting Kilgrave live until he finds Jessica where the Foundation could step in and save her after only a few days under his control. Not long enough to kill her dreams of being a hero, but enough that she would gladly join the Foundation, which would then be her hero. Now, if I could only remember when all that was going to happen. Alex grumbled to himself as he cursed his former self again for not watching those B shows closer. Stay strong, Jessica. Know your suffering is for a good reason. Alex called out aloud, raising his glass of champagne. For the Foundation. Glory to mankind. Which his men echoed. Site 1555. With Bruce Banner. It had been 3 weeks since he had taken that shady offer from the Foundation, and right away, they almost caused the Green Man to burst out. Flashback. I am so glad that you chose to accept our offer, Mr. Banner. I am sure you will come to see it as the best decision you have made in years. Now for your transportation towards the place we have in mind for you. I have 2 options for you, the fun one and the boring one. The man said with a grin on his lips. I mean, I can clearly feel that you want me to ask you about those 2 options. So just get it over with. Bruce said as now that he had already agreed to join them he suddenly felt a lot less nervous. Guess your time on the run has not been good for your humor. But very well, then. The fun option is that I arrange for you to travel with the US Army. In fact, I will make sure that General Ross's own men escort you like a VIP. The very men that hunted you in the past are now bound to protect you with their very lives. The grin on the man's lips clearly told Bruce that this was the idea he hoped he would take. The more boring option would be a plane of ours taking you back to the US in a low-key manner. Again, the tone of his voice told Bruce that he really wanted him to pick the other option. Yet, I don't think the fun option would be good for my heart. Bruce quickly turned down the fun option, which he didn't feel would be all that fun for him. Well, if you think so, I won't push it. Mr. Ricci said, clearly disappointed. Flashback end. Now Bruce was starting to think that he maybe should have taken the offer. After just 3 weeks here, he felt more relaxed than he had at any time since the accident. Maybe it was being able to sleep in a good bed again? Or being treated like a scientist again. He didn't know, but he did feel at peace here. Not that there hadn't been a few close calls. Though even those had been handled really well. He was given some super stretchy clothes with trackers, so even if he transformed, he would be found quickly again. He also liked to stay far away from large groups of people, but he just hadn't been able to live like that on his own. Meaning he always ended up in large cities where sources of stress were plenty. Here? He only had other people from the Foundation to keep him company. There were only 7 people altogether, with Bruce counted in. One was his own assistant, though the young woman was sharp and clever enough to get a PhD of her own soon. He was also given his own on-site counselor to help him deal with his anger and stress. The rest of them were all more of the soldier type who acted like park rangers and were tasked with leading other people away from the restricted area. Bruce had to admit he didn't much like soldiers after what he had been through, and even these were a bit extreme as well. Still, spending time with them got fairly easy rather quickly. The site, as they called it, was nothing impressive, really. Just a single-story wooden structure he wouldn't quite call a house. It had one large room as a living area where they spent most of their free time. 2 bathrooms, which he liked. He hadn't always been able to enjoy a hot shower while on the run. Then, there was a small sleeping area where he thankfully had his own little room and didn't have to sleep in bunks like the soldiers did. Then came 2 basement levels which were where he spent most of his time while not out. The first basement floor held some high-grade surveillance equipment, some weapons that would fit right in at a military base, and his very own laboratory. Oh, how he loved having a lab once again. It wasn't quite as impressive as the one he had working for Ross, but it was miles better than anything he could have ever hoped for while on the run. Here, he could put his mind to work and even do some simple genetic testing. At first, he had wanted to start trying to see if he could do anything about his condition, but he quickly got fascinated by this SCP-1555. It was truly an impossibility, and yet it was as true as he himself was. Hundreds of those little mice had lost their lives in Bruce's lab as he studied them. There wasn't really that much interesting about them except the whole perfect clones thing they had going. When he first learned of that, he had spent days catching mice and checking their DNA, trying to see if he could decipher the experiments they had undergone from the final result. Sadly, he hadn't been able to figure anything out yet, but he had been promised the option to continue his research in a better-equipped lab. After the first craze, he was taken in by the delivery method of the mice. Or more the fact that the object always disintegrated on its own after some time. A week had been spent carrying back those often heavy objects to study. He had even been happy with all that manual labor he had done since it made him strong enough for it. Though even as he watched the process with his own eyes again and again, as well as from recordings he made, he never understood why the molecular bindings failed like that and why no energy was released. Even the residue left behind was little more than the ordinary dust one could expect from the object. He had also pored over surveillance footage of the large cannon shooting the objects out. The properties of that had been even more impossible, truly an anomaly. Though all of that is almost normal compared to the cave itself. He thought to himself as he looked over the date of the cave explorations and experiments. Now, that was something that Banner didn't understand. The cave was the true mystery here, yet it held its secrets in a deathly grip. He had been allowed to see and read all the data the Foundation had on the cave. At first, he had been horrified when he learned that the Foundation had knowingly continued to send people to what was certain death. Even if most of them had been criminals and other scum. But as someone who had lived in areas with high amounts of gang crime, he wasn't too opposed to getting rid of that scum the hard way. Still, he didn't like it one bit, or at least so it was at first. Over the last 3 weeks, he has gotten a better understanding of the Foundation and how vital its work really is. The researcher inside him was also thirsty for the keys to solve the mystery. Keys held in that cave, and that needed at least some sacrifices to obtain. Bruce wasn't a stupid man and could easily see the potential danger of this SCP object. For now the cannon only shot out mostly harmless things filled with mice clones and over a small enough area. He could well enough imagine something like that on a bigger scale. Sending the payloads longer away and loaded with mice or rats carrying dangerous plagues and diseases. Then came the cave itself. Anything could come out of it or be hidden in there, planning who knows what dark and evil deeds. While so far nothing had been found, he understood why they had kept sending people inside to explore it properly. It wasn't that the Foundation people wanted to do it, but that they had to do it. He had heard a few things and learned of a few other SCPs, and if those were real, then the Foundation was right not to take any chances. With it seeming likely that he would leave this place and go to a more prominent site soon, he was starting to become split on what he should study. Some other SCP object the Foundation had gotten its hand on, or should he focus on himself and his condition? The lowest level on this site, being a small and secure bunker for the rest of the personnel to hide in should he go green, kept reminding him of the ever-present danger. Still, he clearly remembered that he might not easily get funding granted if he wanted to cure himself. Should he try to control it instead? "What are you sighing about, Bruce?" The voice of his counselor interrupted his musings. "Just the future, Tanya. What I should do once I leave here, and about my condition." He answered her honestly. "Well, why don't you just start getting a better idea of just what that condition is? We have some ideas, but without tests, they will only ever remain as ideas." The kind woman responded with her ever-present warm smile. "Maybe I'm just scared of the answer, scared that it will show that no cure is possible. Bruce continued with the honesty Tanya had always promoted between them. Now, I'm not the researcher here, Bruce, but I know well enough that you scientists should never fear finding answers. The only thing to fear is not seeking the answers at all. It's only when something is fully understood that the real insights begin to emerge. She offered more of her advice, which Bruce always felt was exceptionally on point. No, as always, you are right, Tanya, I should know what I am dealing with before thinking about solutions to it. Bruce felt better already and gave the older woman a smile. That was another change that had happened to him. He had started to smile a lot more. While he still had his condition to fight with, Bruce felt much better without the threat of the military after him. They should get here soon, right? He asked Tanya, who still stood beside him. That's right, any moment now, really. So, I hope you are all packed up and ready to move on. She affirmed for him. I didn't really have much when I arrived here, so most of what I will bring with me is some samples and data from my research here. What about you? I know Anna will be leaving here as well for another site. Bruce asked to busy himself as he felt nervous about the upcoming meeting. I will be leaving as well. The others here don't need my help like you did. And calm down, Bruce. I can feel how nervous you are. Everything is going to be just fine, I promise. Tanya said in a light voice while lightly patting his shoulder. Well, back when I met him the first time, I didn't know much about the Foundation. I still don't know a lot, but I know enough to know how important he is. Bruce said. He might not have been nervous about meeting important people in the past, but now it was different. Well, enough worrying about it, Bruce, they are here. Tanya broke him from his thoughts as she pointed out of the window where a large convoy came to a stop. Chapter 17 Banner's Decision. Alex sat in the protection of the armored vehicle while his men began ensuring the area was safe for him. Even just a tiny chat with Banner needed a considerable amount of caution and preparation. He found it all rather bothersome but knew that his men were just doing their jobs. He knew that he shouldn't even be here right now. After all, Banner was a danger to those around him since he had poor control of the Hulk at this time. Alex just couldn't help himself. After all, wouldn't he have wasted the fact he was in the MCU if he didn't go out and meet all the heroes? So once again, he sat here while his men ensured nothing short of something anomalous would be able to surprise them. Once the area was clear, one of his guards stepped up to his door and knocked on the window before opening the door to let him out. Alex felt the morning air's chill and even faintly saw his warm breath as a mist in the cooler air. Looking around the forested landscape, he took in nature's simple beauty and enjoyed the fresh air out here. Let's go meet the man then, he said to his men as he started walking, flanked by his heavily armed guards. Alex saw Banner coming out to meet him as he got closer to the cabin/research outpost. The doctor looked much better than the last time he saw him, not just because he had better clothes this time. No, it was clear that Bruce had improved a lot in the short 3 weeks he had lived as a white American man should, eating plenty of fatty red meat. It's good to see you again, Mr. Banner. I trust you have been well in our care. Alex said lightly as he and his men came to a stop a good 5 meters from the nervous doctor. Yes, I have been well, sir. It has been good to get a chance to study and research again. Even more so with something so unique as this SCP, as you call them. Bruce said, trying to ignore the many heavily armed men all around him, which reminded him of Ross and his chase. Most SCPs are indeed quite unique, all right. So we have plenty of other interesting ones you can work with if you decide to join us, Doctor. Alex wasted no time starting to tempt the poor man into his employ. Bruce quickly nodded his head. Yes, I would gladly join the Foundation. Given my own condition, well, I honestly think the Foundation is perfect for me. And I do believe in the work you appear to be doing. While I have only worked with a single SCP, I can already see the need for the Foundation's work. I'm glad you understand the importance of our work, Doctor. May I ask if you have had any thoughts about what you want to work on next? Alex knew himself that he wasn't nearly as smart as Bruce Banner, so while he had ideas about what Bruce could do, he would give the man some freedom. Well, if possible, I would like to review the data and samples I have taken from the mice and other objects here. Hopefully with some more advanced equipment, and well after that, I thought that maybe I could try to understand my own condition more deeply. Bruce said, sounding a bit nervous towards the end. That is wonderful, Doctor. We have the equipment you need at many of our sites, and as for your own condition, well, we naturally are more than willing to help you to get a greater understanding of it. Alex was barely hiding his joy at the fact that Banner seemed to be willing to explore his Hulk side some more. Alex himself hadn't been sure if Bruce had been willing to even consider anything but a cure for the Hulk, but with his own hints and the careful work of psychiatrist Tanya, which he had sent to help him, doing his time at this site, it seemed that he was at least willing to humor them, if nothing else. I hope you aren't afraid of the chill, Mr. Banner. We have made the proper preparation for you at a site up in Canada. It has the needed containment area set up for you should you lose control. It also happens to be far enough away from any other people that should containment fail, you won't have to worry about harming civilians. Alex had wanted to send him to work alongside Pym but had, in the end, decided that starting somewhere more remote would be better for now. Doubly so, given he would want to Hulk out for research. Well, while I do prefer the warmer climates, I can understand why you chose somewhere more remote for me. Bruce said in a sad but understanding tone. Well, once we have your condition under control one way or another, you can join Dr. Brown and Dr. Pym in studying vibranium. Alex threw out some bait, and from the look on Banner's face, he was clearly tempted. Dr. Pym? Like the Hank Pym? Is he also working for the Foundation now? And studying the near-legendary vibranium? The stuff Captain America's shield is made from? Bruce asked, clearly interested. The very same guy and the very same stuff. I dare say that both Pym and myself agree that using it on a shield was a huge waste of it. I will grant you Class 2 security clearance so you can read his reports on the stuff in your own time. Alex kept throwing out bait to pull Banner deeper into both the Foundation and his desire to study his own condition quickly. Now I just need to make him accept the Hulk, and I get myself a very powerful card to use. Suppressing his smirk, Alex kept talking with Banner for a bit longer before taking his leave again and letting the prepared transportation take Banner and the others away and on to their next assignment. Site 001. Having made it back home again, Alex returned to his work after having had his fun playing around with future superheroes. One exciting report was about the status of the arc reactor, with both Anton Vanko and his son aiding them. The Foundation now had not just the larger, more powerful arc reactor but also the smaller one Tony used for his suits. It had apparently not been easy to get the two Vankos to work for them at first. Given that Anton was used to a rough life, he was not easily threatened. Even his son was proving to be tough. The key to breaking them had been the chance to beat the Stark father and son pair. As soon as Anton learned about the new element Stark had found but also failed to create, he had jumped on the chance to beat him and prove himself better than the dead man. Ivan had also been dragged in by his father and was almost equally eager to work and prove not just his father's worth but also his own as he learned that Stark the younger also hadn't managed to create the element yet. They didn't need to know he hadn't even tried yet, right? The prize for success being the chance to name the new element after themselves rather than give Stark more time to work and possibly succeed down the line. While the world still does not have Antonium or Vankoium just yet, it was just a matter of time by now. Alex wasn't sure what to do with them now that they really had served their purpose with the miniature arc reactor being built. Still, he might as well keep them working on the new element since they were so eager to work for free. And who knows, they might prove useful somewhere down the line. Other news includes about a dozen new SCP objects being found and many already contained. All safe objects so far. However, there were also mentions of living SCP objects, which were both future heroes and villains from the MCU, as well as a few others that he had no idea about. The substantial quantity of vibranium was enthusiastically received by his research team, and new information about the metal was uncovered daily. More significantly, each day brought innovative applications and technological advancements. Consequently, the power of the Foundation grew steadily. He still needed to find out how to deal with Wakanda. So far, he had gotten some ideas, but he needed more manpower, more nukes, and many more SCPs to feel safe about it. The only problem was he couldn't just summon a bunch of SCPs since he had no control over which one appeared. After all, he already had 2 of them able to cause an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario, and he didn't want more of those. Still, I have to summon one again real soon, though thankfully, my points are starting to add up on their own now. Sighing, he leaned back and rested his eyes as he was finally finished with today's work. Site 014. Flashback. With Hank Pym. Hank had not been working at this place for long, but he had already been shocked a few times. The first surprise was the sheer size of the place and the fact it was hidden so damn well. He had been picked up and driven to a large old, well-maintained office building. Its size was also nothing to scoff at, being about 20 stories high. The even more impressive thing was it went down just as much. The underground complex was nothing short of amazing when one considered it was built in total secrecy. The number of armed guards and scientists at levels his own company would have been willing to offer almost any price to get was also unbelievable. The price of running this place must have been at least 2 or 3 times his own company, and yet this was just one side of the Foundation. He had been given a tour of the place by Director Brown, who was indeed a lovely woman of British descent, though her accent was very faint and her mind as sharp as Janet's. Though sadly he was kept from seeing most of the base due to his low security clearance, which he could get upgraded by joining up fully. They sure knew how to tempt a man. After the tour, he was allowed to begin working with the vibranium almost right away. He was also given a bunch of data on the stuff from all their other tests of it. And boy, was the metal a wonder. The things it could do when used right completely blew his mind. The stuff could push science decades ahead in a few years if only there was enough of it. Hank soon discovered he was one of many who lamented the low amounts of the metal for study and use. Even Brown kept cursing the low amounts every time she came down to check out their progress. At times, she even joined in as well. The woman clearly liked doing hands-on research, though she had little time with all the admin work. Hank had felt the same and didn't bother with the admin, which was why he ended up getting ousted like that. Still, Hank kept most of his focus on the research and work being done while getting to know some of the people he worked with. Quickly becoming friends over their shared disappointment for Stark using it for a shield of all things. Even though he focused mainly on the vibranium, Hank kept an ear open for chatter about everything, wanting to overhear stuff about the Foundation. Most of the stuff sounded crazy, though he did learn that it seemed Wakanda held some vibranium and only pretended to sell everything they had to Stark back then. However, he didn't like how aggressive they all sounded when whispering about wanting to take it by force. He had looked up the nation and didn't think sending dozens of nukes at the poor place sounded necessary. And hadn't that been another huge surprise? Learning that this Foundation held a considerable amount of nuclear weapons and even held some in DC, it sounded like from whispers he heard about a facility there. Janet had lost herself in the quantum realm to stop a nuke from hitting it, and here, the Foundation could nuke the place at any time they wanted to. Then, all of a sudden, one day, Brown had kicked in the door all excited with an assistant behind her carrying a bottle of champagne and glasses. "I have great news, everyone." Upper management finally decided that vibranium was an important enough asset to make a move to get some. Today, a mobile task force secured more than 200 kilograms of it, she yelled out in excitement, causing her accent to come through clearly. The room was dead silent after her announcement. All of us were no doubt shocked at the unbelievable news. The rest of them all recovered before him, all letting out excited exclaims of their own. Hank took a lot longer to recover as he hadn't known such an amount had even been possible. 200 kilograms? That much? Is that even possible? He couldn't help but ask while glasses were being passed out. That's right, Pim, more than 200 kilograms of it. Finally, we can start making things out of it and using the stuff rather than just researching it. Brown said, handing the still half-stunned man a glass. Did we raid Wakanda for it or that arms dealer? A younger researcher by the name of Johan asked. It was from that arms dealer, yet, we got every bit he had. However, it seems plans are being drawn up for dealing with Wakanda as well. A request for ideas and suggestions was sent out as well. You should see it in your Foundation mail later. Brown said as the assistant started to fill their glasses. Hank was still trying to get his head around the situation here. He thought vibranium was nearly impossible to obtain in a quantity of more than a gram or two. Now he was learning that just some random arms dealer had 200 kilograms of it. Not to mention, it seemed Wakanda had even more still. All right, everyone, I need you to continue to work hard on this. The more and better the results, the easier it will be to convince the command to get us more of it. Now, I have sent in requests for more already, so let us have a drink for our future success and for the glory of mankind. Brown finished her speech, and everyone raised their glasses and cried out, "Glory to mankind!" Before drinking, Hank was a bit slower than the rest as he was starting to get a better understanding of how little he knew before all this, and he had worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. before. Chapter 18 Just buying some paint. Alright, system, let's get this over with. Summon a random SCP, please. Ding. Understood, host, please stand by as the random SCP is summoned. Ding. Warning. Host, an SCP has appeared in the world and is outside Foundation control. Host is asked to deal with the situation and follow the Foundation's goal of securing, containing, and protecting. Ding. Warning. SCP-334 has appeared. Ding. Congratulations to Host for getting Site-131, a Class 4 Foundation facility in England. 50 Class B combat personnel, 5,000 Class C combat personnel, 250 research personnel, 1,000 administrative personnel, and 150 maintenance personnel. Ding. Host has been rewarded with Unit Alpha 4 Pony Express consisting of 25,000 undercover agents embedded in postal services throughout the world. Alex released the breath he had been holding as he got the information on the SCP object summoned by the system. Just a relatively easy to deal with Euclid object. Better yet, he got a site up in England, which meant he now had a presence there. The world still had far too many blind spots for the current Foundation, and Alex, being in charge of the whole thing, didn't like that one bit. Still, he could only wait patiently for it to fix itself since he couldn't just put up new sites everywhere. He had neither the manpower nor cash for it. And once again, my damn SCP locating tool is worthless. Really telling me it's in a forest? What use is that? He cursed loudly at the uselessness of his system as it just showed him a picture of the SCP in his mind when he thought about its location. Sure, he would now be able to see it in real time at any time he wanted. Which was nice since he liked foxes well enough, and this SCP was a beauty to look at for sure. However, that didn't help him locate it at all. Might as well tell the director of Site-131 about a possible sighting of it, have him keep his eyes and ears open. Maybe we could find its heat signature. He muttered to himself while writing up a notice. After that, he went back to take care of his work. Just like every other day, there were plenty of requests for this and that. In fact, he was lacking some rather critical Foundation facilities which made the whole Foundation work less efficiently and more expensive. Triskelion. So, tell me, Coulson, did Sitwell have something to say about this deal with Ricci then? Fury asked Coulson as soon as the man closed the door behind him. Yes, sir. I got everything I could out of both Sitwell and the agent he had put in charge after he got promoted. Carlson then happily began to report on his findings. The deal with Ricci was just as Pierce had said. Though Ricci had voluntarily increased the monthly payments a few times since the agreement had been struck. Did they increase it with this latest spike in activity? Fury asked, cutting off the report. Carlson quickly looked down in his report. Yes, they did, sir. By 50% rather than the 25% they did the other 3 times. And what is happening to the money from them? He pressed. Well, the account is being used by accounting to cover shortfalls, sir. When somewhere needs more funds but getting an increase might be hard or take too long, they sometimes use that account for it. Carlson explained the whole system that had been set up by the middle management on their own. He also presented the accounting errors that had led to this being possible in the first place. So, what I understand is that the money is not being mishandled. Fury asked, though he was reasonably sure he was right on that. Yes, sir, I looked into what projects had used the fund in the past, and they were for reasonable things. Carlson put his boss at ease, never knowing that those projects were all led by Hydra agents. And what about other deals? Fury asked as he was satisfied with what he heard about the Ricci deal. Or as satisfied as he could be after having been in the dark about it for so long. There are just a few we didn't know about, sir. All of them were handled by the same agent who sent his reports to an old email of Sitwell's that was not checked or used anymore. We have a deal going like with Ricci with the hand here in the US. We used to have with the powers over in Russia as well, but of the 4 families and 6 groups only 2 families and 1 group still pays, the others are considered done deals. Carlson continued on his report and filled in when asked about details from time to time. All right, it seems we solved the mystery of Ricci for now. Get Sitwell to give them a call and tell them you are the new main contact, we wouldn't want any future accidents. Send in Hawkeye when you leave, I have a new mission for him. Fury said as he dismissed Carlson. Shortly after Carlson left, Clint Barton entered. Good you are here, Barton, I would like an update on your pet spider. Fury went straight to it. Agent Romanoff has performed excellently in all the missions we have been assigned to together. She is both hard-working and loyal, now I know what you want to say, sir. While she did indeed betray her former employer, we both know that that was very reasonable given their nature. Clint said. Do you believe that she's ready for solo missions? Fury inquired. She is more than ready, sir, in fact, I would go as far as saying she is properly one of the best agents we have. And while I do enjoy going on missions with her, few missions truly need the both of us. Clint replied after a moment. Well, if you are that confident, then I indeed do think we can accept her as one of our own. With all due respect, sir, I thought the Budapest mission was meant to confirm that. Clint spoke up for his friend. Oh, it was, but it never hurts to be extra sure. Fury added before picking up a folder from his table and handing it to Clint. Take this and give it to Romanoff, Agent Romanoff, that is. He finished with a rare smile. Indeed, Fury had something worth smiling about. After all, it wasn't every day that you acquired such a skilled agent like the Black Widow. Oscorp, Norman Osborn's office. While Norman typically tried to get the military as a client as often as possible, he wasn't afraid of getting those on the darker side of society either. More so when he knew his rival Stark did much the same. However, he knew that Stark didn't meet those people himself as he had Stane to do it for him. Norman would have liked to have someone as capable as Stane working for him, but such skilled people were rare. Today, Norman was waiting on one Alexander Ricci, the overkill himself. This was not the first time he had dealt with him either. Ricci had always liked big weapons. Though today, he was after something else. While he knew Ricci was looking for some rather advanced EMP shielding, it just wasn't something Norman was working on right now. So, while he was interested in this cave that had been found that worked as a powerful natural EMP field, he wouldn't invest into it without at least getting some samples or something. No, today's meeting was about something one of his scientists had done entirely by accident. An extraordinary black paint. It had come about while experimenting on some rather sensitive material, so he wouldn't show the paint to anyone who might ask questions since it was in a very limited quantity. Though the fact that it was rare was why he wanted a lot of money for it. However, given how hard it was to get to stick to anything and dry properly, it made it a hard sell. This was why he was overseeing the talk himself, since he didn't trust anyone else with not fucking the deal up one way or another. Looking down at a monitor, he saw the live feed from the elevator going up to his office. There, his assistant was bringing up a handsome young man and his much larger guard. Norman couldn't help but narrow his eyes at the sight of the youth. He naturally knew who that was. Alexander Ricci, his guest. No, the reason he narrowed his eyes was because he knew for a fact that the man who looked a decade younger than himself was at least older than his own father. Yes, Ricci was a mystery, given how he managed to still seem so young after so many years. As someone working more in the biotech sphere, Norman naturally was very interested in the secret, but he wasn't foolish enough to think his wealth could protect him against overkill. Ding! The sound of the elevator arriving sounded, and the door opened, letting the three people inside. "Welcome, Mr. Ricci." Norman greeted him with a smile as he stood up. "I hope you have been well, Osborn. I heard the military turned to you after that fiasco of General Ross." Alex smoothly revealed he knew what should be highly guarded secrets to add some more mystery to himself. "Right you are, Mr. Ricci. I was lucky to snag that contract up before Stark, or maybe he was too busy with his child to do it." Norman tried to crack a little joke while inwardly he was sweating from the fact Ricci knew such military secrets. How the hell does a criminal get such information? Is the damn army full of leaks? He cursed in his mind as he was damn sure no leaks existed from his side. If Tony is anything like his own father, he won't spare the poor kid much time. Ricci responded with his own crack at Stark. "And my contacts said that Stark wasn't even offered this contract, you were their first pick. Damn, seems it was the military that can't keep its own secrets." He continued to curse in his head while smiling lightly. "You sure are well informed, Mr. Ricci. First, let me begin by apologizing that I couldn't help with your EMP project. I simply don't have anything better than what Stark offers at the moment, and I don't have the funds to spare either," was what Norman decided to open up with. Getting the dead deals out of the way before opening new ones. "I can hardly blame you, Mr. Osborn. After all, there is little market for what I requested," Alex said back with only mild disappointment in his tone. "The other thing you showed interest in is the perfect dark paint. We finished testing and are ready to sell," Norman said as he handed over the information on his special paint. "I hope you don't mind if I take a minute," Alex said as he started to read the file on the spot without waiting for a response. Norman could only give a weak smile in response as he sat there waiting for the Italian man. Alex quickly read it over and became sure this thing was made doing experiments with the Venom symbiote. The paint didn't like heat and would become liquid again if exposed to it. Same with powerful sound waves. Thankfully, Alex had something that could be used to counteract those traits. Vibranium. If he used the paint on that, it should give him a really dark material. "How much of this paint do you have, and can you make more?" Alex finally broke the silence with his question. "We only have 320 milliliters, and no, we can't make more of it. The material it was made from, an artificial chemical, sadly can't be reproduced." Norman shook his head with a sad smile. "Perfect, I want every drop you have and your word. You won't make and sell more of it or speak a word to anyone," Alex said as he leaned back and looked hard at Norman. Norman couldn't hide away his smile as he heard what Ricci wanted. After all, the more he wanted it, the higher the price he could ask for. "Well, I'm sure we can figure something out, Mr. Ricci." With that, they began a back and forth about the price until Norman finally stood to bid goodbye with a happy smile on his lips and Ricci's guard carrying a small container with a pitch-black thick liquid. As the door closed and the elevator began its descent, Norman couldn't help but send for a good bottle of wine. "You really did want that paint badly, didn't you, Ricci?" he muttered to himself as he couldn't help but be incredibly satisfied with how much he managed to get out of the man. Chapter 19 Jarvis. Days continued to pass for O5-1, known to few as Alexander Ricci. As the sole member of the O5 command, he needed to deal with a tremendous amount of work. All made worse by the lack of crucial Foundation facilities which added extra loads to all other facilities and most of all him. Still, he had no choice but to work his hardest to keep the Foundation working as efficiently as possible while hiding from the entire world, which included a certain one-eyed pirate and a few highly advanced hidden nations. Many eyes looked at this world from all around, which only made it all the more difficult to remain hidden while carrying out the Foundation's lofty goals. Every day, Alex was tempted to use more of his stockpile of points to summon a few more SCPs to increase the personnel available to him. However, the risk of a dangerous SCP kept him from doing that, as well as knowing that most facilities would only be a greater drain on his limited resources and time. He had some ideas for ways to make quite some money, but a few of those just needed time, like waiting for the events of Iron Man and buying up shares of Stark on the cheap. That alone could earn him a few billions. Yet Alex knew well enough that the Foundation at its full size would need a budget up in the trillions. He knew this from spending some of his precious free time looking over Foundation data, and damn, some SCPs and their research was an unending drain on finances. Not to mention how often an SCP couldn't be moved, which meant buying up land. Adding up the needed bribes and salaries and other expenses and you had the single most expensive organization in the world. After my deal with the Mandarin, I should get some more breathing room. Which means that deal can't go wrong. Alex swore to himself as he left his bunker to focus on the work of the Ricci family. With Tony Stark. While the world's most powerful shadow was kept busy with work, the world's greatest genius was instead fighting his own boredom. Tony was the type that would go between phases where he would get completely obsessed with some kind of invention and the other time, he would relax with some pretty girl and have some fun like the playboy he was. Over the past half a year, he had been working on his most outstanding work yet. A one-of-a-kind invention way ahead of its time, just like Tony's own genius. Just a rather very intelligent system. Or JARVIS as he called it. He would probably never admit out loud to anyone that he had spent a good bit of time coming up with that acronym. Still, since he finally had a proper breakthrough months ago, Tony had been busy making his vision a reality. And Tony never failed at what he set out to do. Which is why he was now the proud owner and inventor of the world's one and only AI. Creating something so ahead of its time hadn't been easy and had taken a long time. While Obadiah had done his best to keep the company running, without Tony to pump out new tech for so long, the poor man had been getting almost desperate by the time the AI was done. Usually, Tony would have gone out to celebrate his new invention as soon as it was done. But this time, he had wanted to play around with it, and since Obadiah had been desperate for something, Tony had used Jarvis to help upgrade and fix some things over the past few weeks. After getting Obadiah off his back, as the man was now busy turning Tony's work into money, the genius was left alone and bored. Something that never proved a good idea. Peeb. It would seem the update was a success, sir. The voice of Jarvis filled the room and made Tony, who was lying down on the couch, turn his head toward the terminal. Was there ever any doubt of that? After all, the code was written by none other than me. Tony said as he got up and picked up his tablet to check the code himself for any problems. Well, given that you were drinking throughout writing it, I was worried. The AI responded back with the dry humor he had patched into its code last night. Sure seems like it's working without any problems, though. Tony said as he threw his tablet aside and returned to lying down. Jarvis, check if there are any parties worth attending going on tonight. Sorry, sir, I'm afraid that there are no parameters for what parties you might find worthy of attending. Well, we need to have that fixed at once. Look through the net for articles about me attending parties in the past. Then match those up with articles of me leaving said party with a beautiful woman and further articles of the woman after the fact. Just one moment, sir. Jarvis then began executing the order and filtered through an unbelievable amount of data and started to run algorithms that tried to find similarities between the parties he had attended in the past and find factors that seemed to indicate which party he might enjoy attending the most. Should those articles have any links with those about your secret child, sir? Jarvis asked soon after, as he had found that it seemed that most of the women he had returned with from a party also had articles linking them to a secret child. I don't have a secret child. In fact, find out where that damned rumor came from in the first place. Tony said as he sat up while huffing and puffing. He had tried to find out on his own before, but whoever was behind the whole thing sure knew how to hide. After letting Jarvis work for a few short minutes, he already managed to do what Tony hadn't in days of trying. It would appear the first mentions of it came from 3 people working for the US Air Force, sir. The damn military? Why the fuck would they do something like that? Find out. Tony knew how important he was to the military. He didn't doubt that he was considered a national asset of the highest importance. So he couldn't understand why they would do something like that. It would appear that something was stolen from them by one Alexander Ricci. And the article was meant to move focus away from that. Jarvis responded back surprisingly quickly. Ricci stole something from them? Can you find out what it is? Tony was getting more and more interested the more he learned. He knew Alexander personally. He had met the guy a few times as well. The last time was at his parents' funeral. He had joined the younger Tony for a few drinks that time. Though he was unnerved by the fact he was supposedly old as fuck while looking so young. I can't find anything other than it might have been a plane. Though I will note that Mr. Stain sent you a message months ago about being invited by Ricci to study the object. Jarvis came back soon after. Oh? What exactly did Obadiah say? Tony asked, intrigued. I resent it to your phone, sir. Jarvis replied as Tony's phone vibrated. Picking up his phone, Tony started to read the message from Obadiah. It was short and very much like him. Just informing Tony that if he got bored, he could give Ricci a call and go help him look at something he had gotten his hands on. He also mentioned that while Ricci wanted Tony to help his own people to understand what they had gotten their hands on, Tony should try to get some inspiration from it as well. Very much like his old friend, never letting go of an opportunity to get some new tech to sell. Still, Tony was finding it tempting. You also have another message from Mr. Ricci. Sir. Sending it over now. Jarvis voiced out before Tony got a new text. This one was indeed from Ricci himself and was a request worded kinda like a challenge about creating some powerful EMP shielding. It seemed that Ricci had found a cave somewhere with a unique effect of creating a powerful EMP field if a current were introduced. Stark Industries was the current leader in EMP shielding as it was. So it made sense he would turn to Tony if he needed something even better. Still, the idea of a natural cave being capable of something like generating an EMP field was interesting for sure. Jarvis, have Happy organize a party and tell Obadiah to arrange a meeting with Ricci at his place. I'm curious about what the Air Force lost that made them desperate enough to sling mud at me, Tony said, concluding that despite his curiosity, his desire to party took precedence. Site 001. It was dinner time at the Ricci mansion, and the master of the place was sitting at the end of a long table while eating a nice bit of red meat. Alex was the type of person who had red meat at least once a day, and it needed to be bloody. This habit had, in fact, made some people joke that he was a vampire. Well, when someone has been unaging for half a century, then it is only reasonable for people to come up with their own guesses. In fact, Alex made sure to spread so many different rumors out among the underworld that it was hard to know which was his own and which other people came up with. Sir, it has been confirmed that SHIELD has greenlit Natasha Romanoff for solo missions. We anticipate they'll soon push her into challenging situations, likely leading to her disillusionment with the organization, an aide reported during dinner. Alex, with a smile, responded, "Is that so? It seems Fury is eager to drive his latest asset right into our welcoming arms. And what about our own operatives?" he inquired further. "As you're aware, sir, following our successful capture of General Dreykov, we extracted vital information and secured his assets, including the Red Room and its personnel. While none rival Natasha Romanoff's skill, we still have a significant number of talented agents undergoing further training." Alex probed again, "When will their training be complete?" "By spring, for the initial group. We're planning a continuous integration of agents into Foundation personnel for the coming years. Notably, O5-8 has requested the first selection from these agents for her new mobile task force," the aide replied confidently. Alex, acknowledging his own policy, mused internally, "This is the first time I have faked the orders of other O5 members. I can only hope that it won't cause any problems down the line." "We also have news from Mr. Stain. He has sent out a decent-sized shipment of weapons, ammo, weapon parts, and raw materials for nuclear weapons," another subordinate said shortly after. "I trust it was all handled in a way that left no clues or tracks leading back to us." Alex didn't even bother looking up at this report. "We did all we could. We can't ensure that Mr. Stain didn't leave a few clues, but he is normally too good for that," the man answered easily. "That is the best we can get, I guess. Anything else to add?" "Yes, sir. He also said that Tony Stark wanted to come over in response to an invitation from you." Yeah, I did invite him in to look at the Quinjets. Have one of them set aside so he can tinker with it and ensure we have plenty of engineering personnel there to learn from him," Alex said, as he indeed did remember giving that offer some time back. He had pretty much given up on it, and good progress had already been made without his help. But Alex was not about to turn down the chance of getting one of the world's best inventors and engineers to upgrade some of his gear. The rest of the meal continued with one of his men stepping up and giving their report about things that either purely conserved the Ricci crime family or things that had no apparent ties with the Foundation. Well, except when O5-8 was brought up, but without any context, it honestly didn't give away much. So, most of it was just about the expansion of activities as he had ordered. They met with the expected amount of resistance, though in clearing out rivaling powers, there was a chance of encountering objects of interest, so every mission was carefully monitored by trusted personnel. This was also one of the reasons they were getting so many SCPs. It was only a matter of time before they ran into someone using SCPs to try and stop him. This has already happened a few times so far. Yet every object hadn't given his Foundation personnel much trouble, even if they lost some D-class. Thus far, he had been keeping clear of the more notable villains from the MCU with either some kind of powers themselves or who had some SCP humanoid objects working for them. Chapter 21 Superpower. Alex was woken up in the middle of the night by a series of ping sounds and a dull blue light shining on his face. Ding! Congratulations to host for the successful containment of SCP-334. Rewards are being given out. Sitting up in his bed, Alex turned on the lights and rubbed his eyes. Reading the system message, Alex used the system SCP locating tool to see the SCP object in real time. And it had indeed changed from being outside in some forest to instead being inside a metal holding cell. They sure found it fast. Though since everything seems to be under control, I will wait to find out what happened in the morning. Ding! Congratulations to host for getting trait minor temperature resistance. The reward this time was something very different from the normal ones. This one seemed to be a true personal power reward, finally. System, what does the trait do? He quickly asked his unreliable system. Ding! Host's new trait allows host to feel perfectly fine at 100 degrees over and under, 20 degrees Celsius. That was kind of disappointing, really. Sure, it meant he wouldn't freeze at even the coldest place on Earth, but 120 degrees as the upper limit meant he would still burn as easily as everyone else if he came in contact with fire. Still, with it being winter, it did mean that he could walk around in just his suit and look extra mysterious since he wouldn't be or seem cold. Shaking his head, Alex went back to sleep. While he would have liked to check the report about the capture and containment of SCP-334, he also needed his rest if he wanted to get his share of work done tomorrow. The next day, Alex went down into his bunker after his breakfast. There, he started looking into how they had found the stellar fox. Much like he had assumed, they had used thermal sensors to find it. Only it would seem that even during the winter it had not been possible to find it with satellites. No, instead, his men had to go a much more resource-intense way about it. The team managed to contain the object in an impressively short amount of time. A comprehensive police operation was orchestrated across the entire United Kingdom, confirming the object's presence. He was glad it had proven to indeed be there. This did once more point towards new Foundation facilities being granted in or around the same area which the SCP object itself was active in. He had somewhat been expecting that to be the case, but he was still hesitant to draw any type of conclusions this soon. Site personnel employed extensive use of thermal sensors to search every forest meticulously. The operation was a colossal undertaking, inevitably attracting significant media attention in today's connected world. However, contingency plans were in place. An elaborate cover story about a substantial child kidnapping ring was fabricated to explain the scale of the search. And thanks to the hard work of the police and other organizations of similar nature, all the kids were saved. Sadly, the vile criminals had all died as they resisted and fought back hard. On a completely unrelated note, it would seem Site-131 needed more D-Class personnel. Director Cadwell was someone who knew how to act. Both when he needed to act in total secrecy and when it would be best to perform in a high-profile manner. With how capable Director Cadwell had proven himself so far, Alex had no doubt SCP-334 would be safely contained. Not to mention that the MCU had even better tech than the SCP universe, so the containment should be easily more effective. Guess this is another SCP I don't have to worry about. He thought to himself as he leaned back and put his thoughts onto the reward. Receiving a reward that genuinely empowered him proved the system had that capability. Previously, he had only received half of Midas's power, a seemingly incomplete reward that lacked any real effect. This raised the possibility that the system might be incapable of bestowing true powers onto him, resorting instead to deceptive half-measures. Alex's skepticisms towards the system was not unfounded, especially given its immense, reality-altering capabilities and its previous threats of lethal punishment. His wariness had only intensified as he, over time, noticed inconsistencies in the system's actions, like receiving specific SCPs despite its claims of only summoning random ones. This contradiction suggested the system had some level of control over its processes, a fact it seemed keen to conceal. Alex, unsure of its motives, remained vigilant and cautious in his dealings with the system. After all, he knew well enough that with every passing month, he ended up bound further to the system. As it was the system that had put him in charge of the Foundation, it would also be able to take that away. And with every month, the Foundation grew stronger. This also meant that it would be worse for him to lose control since he would find it harder to survive. Now, another aspect of the system's abilities is being exposed and proven. Alex had much to ponder about. For there was no doubt that as much as the system could give him, it could take. It also opened up a dangerous road. Alex was an O5 member, and as of right now making up the entire council. He was never meant to be a frontline man. However, the more powerful he became, the higher the temptation of becoming one would be. This meant his safety would be at higher risk, and with him, so would the Foundation be at risk. Alex knew this, yet he also knew himself well enough that it would be hard to resist not playing around with the major heroes, villains, and events. Even now he was tempted to just spend the day trying to figure out what the best powers would be and how he could use them. Shaking his head, he cleared his mind and went back to focus on his work. Hoping to get as much done as possible before his first meeting with none other than the Tony Stark himself. Site-160. With Bruce Banner. Bruce had been staying here at Site-160 for a few weeks now, and he was deeply impressed with the facility. It was located right in the middle of nowhere, and everyone stayed inside all day to escape the frigid conditions outside. Not that there was much of a reason to not just want to stay inside all the time anyway. The site was filled with the dream equipment of every scientist out there. Not to mention that the other common areas were also stocked with everything one could wish for, including training facilities for both beginners and elites as well as other areas for relaxation. Other than the on-site entertainment, there were also plenty of people for Bruce to talk with, something that had been in relatively short supply while on the run. Among the site personnel, he most enjoyed spending time with the other researchers. Though often those conversations mostly just boiled down to him bombarding them with questions about the SCPs of which he had access to information about. While the amount of information might be minimal as of now, he still could read about a good few hundred or so SCP objects. Sure, most of those files still had lots of data redacted from them due to his clearance, but it was more than enough to give a good idea about the possible SCP world out there. Other than the lab, another area of interest was the pit. The containment cell set up for him if he needed it. It was a deep 20-meter drop leading to a large underground area with entertainment set up for the Hulk. This was something Bruce hadn't even dared to think about before. He had always imagined large steel cells with restraints, and all kinds of tools and weapons to subdue the Hulk would be how he would end up if he was captured by Ross. It went a long way to show how much better the Foundation was at containing threats than someone like Ross. The Foundation knew that his green side was not easy to keep locked up if he wanted out. So they just didn't really bother with all that and went the route of trying to make the Hulk just not want to leave. Sure, the pit was a massive steel cell underground with a tight and powerful lid to make leaving hard, but that was mainly meant to give the Hulk enough time inside the pit to get interested in all the toys. Yeah, they filled the space with things to hit and smash, games to play, and plenty of food of all types. Naturally, there were also all kinds of monitoring equipment. The whole impression he got was that the Foundation, indeed, had the ability to handle the Hulk. Which made him all the more confident that he would find a cure for his condition in time. After all, with a good lab and enough resources, his last fear was the danger of any experiments as they might cause the Hulk to come out. Still, Bruce was mainly focusing on finishing up with the SCP-1555 research and tests. The chief researcher in charge of this site had also already informed him of what kind of tests and experiments they thought would be the best place to start concerning the Hulk when he was ready. Clearly the Foundation was eager for him to start his study on the Hulk, yet he was glad they didn't push before he himself felt that he was ready for that. Triskelion. So tell me, Hill, do you have any leads on the disappearance of Bruce Banner? Nick Fury asked one of his best and most trusted agents. With Coulson checking up on the Ricci leads and coming up with nothing on that front, all Fury had left was Hill's investigation. No, sir. I'm afraid it looks like a worst-case scenario. No signs of a transformation, no trace of our men, no clue pointing to the fact that Banner simply left on his own. So unless he suddenly shows up somewhere soon, we can only assume the worst, assume and prepare for it. The female agent replied with a grave tone, and her head bent forward as she gave an unfavorable report. Only so many preparations we can take to the possible threat of an army of Hulk-like creatures being produced by parties unknown. Fury's tone was no less grave than Hill's. From the moment they lost sight of Banner in such suspicious circumstances, he knew it was a possibility that someone had captured the man. As unlikely an event that would seem given his strength when transformed. While S.H.I.E.L.D. only had data from a few transformations and attempts from Ross's side to capture him, it did give S.H.I.E.L.D. a good enough idea of the threat the Green Giant was. Thankfully, Banner himself was a peaceful man, so they didn't have to worry about him trying to use his power for evil. The same couldn't be said for most others out there. Fury wouldn't have allowed Ross to gain the ability to create regular super soldiers, much less beings like the Hulk. And if he didn't trust the US Army with that, he sure as hell didn't trust anyone else but his own shield with something like that. "Do we have any likely suspects?" he asked her while he went over a possible list in his own head. "Everyone out there has a motive to be behind it. Does any one of them have the ability to pull this off?" "Doubtful, sir. Unless Banner went with them peacefully, which is doubtful on its own, we don't believe anyone could have taken him. At least not taken him and kept him for very long." Fury had much the same thoughts himself. Every single nation out there and a few dozen other organizations would gladly take in the Hulk. But for them to pull it off? Impossible, much less in such a secret fashion like had been done here. The Hulk was by no means invincible, but taking it down would have cost S.H.I.E.L.D. a heavy price, much less any lesser force out there. And for the chance of Banner going with someone willingly? He doubted anyone out there could convince him of something like that. Then all we can do is keep our eyes and ears open and make preparations for more green monsters like Banner starting to show up. Fury finally said grimly. And while he hoped that something like that wouldn't happen, Fury wasn't the type to just sit down and pray. Home of Tony Stark. Tony had spent the past week just letting go. Spending each day drinking, getting drunk, and having a new girl in his arms every day. Well, at least one, that is. There were a few days where the number had been higher than just one. But the fun was clearly over now. Pepper was just about done with him, so it was time to get back to work until she calmed back down. And it just so happened that he had an interesting project lined up. So he had arranged to pay Richie a visit and see what the stuff he looted off the Air Force was all about. If the military dared to throw mud at him over it, well, it had to be impressive. Though no matter how impressive it was, he, Tony Stark, the brightest mind in the world, would make something better than that with ease.